she was never the same. Nestled deep within the misty folds of the Smoky Mountains, the dense woods were alive with whispers, the sort only the wind could carry. For Lila Harris, a seasoned but weary hiker, these woods had always been her refuge. This time, however, her venture into the wilderness felt different. The air seemed heavier, and the vibrant greens of the forest were subdued under an overcast sky. As twilight approached, she came upon an old logging trail not marked on her map. Curious, and with daylight dwindling, she decided to set up camp nearby. Something about the trail called to her, a peculiar magnetism she couldn't explain. The crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional chirp of crickets did little to dispel the creeping unease. By the time her campfire flickered to life, the shadows had grown long, and the forest around her was cloaked in an eerie silence. Lila tried to shake the feeling, attributing her nerves to exhaustion, but the whispers in the wind felt almost purposeful now. As she stared into the flames, the legend of Daniel Wiggins floated to the forefront of her mind. Daniel Wiggins, the frontier trapper turned outlaw, was said to have roamed these very woods in the late 1800s. A master of the terrain and notorious for his violent temper, he'd lived and died by the blade. Rival trappers, envious of his wealth and pelts, had ambushed him on a frigid winter night, leaving his body to rot beneath the snow. Since then, stories of his ghost seeking vengeance had persisted among locals, a tale whispered to discourage wanderers from venturing too far. Suddenly, the crack of a branch snapped her from her thoughts. Her heart raced as she scanned the perimeter of the firelight. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest echo of a laugh, low, guttural, and unmistakably human. Lila's logical mind told her it was just the wind playing tricks, but when she glanced back at her fire, her blood ran cold. The flames were unnaturally still, frozen mid-dance as if time itself had paused. She grabbed her flashlight and shone it into the darkness. The beam illuminated nothing but trees, yet she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Deciding she wouldn't sleep until dawn, she stoked the fire and sat with her back to a large oak, her flashlight clutched tightly in her hand. Hours dragged by until the forest seemed to grow restless. The wind howled louder, carrying whispers that sounded suspiciously like her name. "Lila," a voice finally said, clear as day. Her flashlight beam darted wildly into the dark. Then she saw him. Standing just beyond the firelight was a man cloaked in shadow. His figure was tall and wiry, and his eyes glowed faintly like embers from a dying fire. He wore what looked like buckskin clothing, torn and stained with dark patches that could only be blood. His face was obscured by a tangled beard and long, matted hair, but his presence was unmistakably malevolent. "Daniel Wiggins," Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. The name seemed to hang in the air, as though even the forest feared it. The figure stepped closer, and the fire dimmed. "You shouldn't be here," he rasped, his voice like the scraping of rusted metal. "These woods are mine." Lila couldn't move. Her body felt rooted to the ground, her muscles locked in terror. The ghost's glowing eyes bore into hers, and she felt an overwhelming wave of anger and sorrow wash over her, emotions that weren't her own. "I was betrayed," he growled, gesturing to the deep gash across his neck that seemed to ooze spectral blood. "They took what was mine. Now I take what's theirs." The wind roared, extinguishing the fire completely. Darkness enveloped the campsite, save for the faint glow emanating from Daniel Wiggins. Lila's breath came in shallow gasps as he moved closer still, until he was mere feet away. "Why are you here?" he demanded, his voice echoing unnaturally. I didn't know," she stammered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm just hiking. I didn't mean to disturb you." His head tilted, as though weighing her words. For a moment, the forest fell silent, the oppressive stillness pressing down on her chest. Then, with a guttural snarl, he reached out a hand. It passed through her arm like ice, and Lila screamed as a searing pain shot through her body. Memories that weren't hers flooded her mind, visions of snowy nights, blood-stained pelts, and the faces of the men who had killed him. "A debt must be paid," he hissed, his voice reverberating in her skull. "You must carry my story. Let them know I still roam. Let them fear my name." Lila nodded frantically, desperate for the torment to stop. The ghost's grip loosened, and he stepped back, his form beginning to fade. "Do not forget," he warned, his glowing eyes the last to disappear. The fire roared back to life as if nothing had happened, but Lila knew better. Her body trembled uncontrollably, and her mind raced with the weight of what she'd just experienced. Dawn couldn't come soon enough, but when it did, the forest looked different. The trees seemed older, the trail more treacherous, and every sound made her jump. When she finally stumbled out of the woods, she found herself at a small mountain town where locals eyed her pale face and trembling hands with concern. She recounted her encounter to the innkeeper, who listened intently before shaking his head. "You've seen him, then," the man said grimly. "Daniel Wiggins doesn't let folks go unless he's got a reason. You best heed his warning. His story's been passed down for generations, but few believe it these days. Maybe it's time they start." Lila nodded, though her mind was elsewhere. The memories Daniel had shown her still lingered, vivid and raw. She felt an inexplicable connection to him now, as though she carried a fragment of his pain. She resolved to write about her experience, not just as a warning to others, but as a way to exorcise the ghost from her mind. But even as she left the Smoky Mountains behind, she knew she would never truly escape. On quiet nights, when the wind whispered through the trees, she could still hear his voice, a chilling reminder of the price she'd paid for stepping into Daniel Wiggins's domain.